In terms of activism, I think some of the most helpful but surprisingly rare traits are thinking big about what's possible and being willing to continuously reach out to people to achieve what's possible. So this is what I'm planning today, and I think part of why I believe in myself as an activist is because I've had these traits for a while in situations of compassion. When we're thinking big, I think it's helpful to keep in mind how one thing that mathematicians and psychologists have repeatedly found is just how quickly messages spread globally with little effort. And I have some screenshots, and I'm going to be putting up a lot of screenshots with enough of the URLs that if people really wanted to, they could find the articles to read. I'm mostly just doing this as a principle because I don't think you should necessarily trust what people say in a live stream if they don't cite where they found the information. Here are some of the people, the mathematicians and psychologists who have studied this phenomena, sometimes known as degrees of separation or small world networks.
Enjoy more ways to save at
And we talked about this in the previous stream, but just going to read this part again. So, Microsoft study analyzing 30 billion messages from 240 million users found an average of 6.6 degrees of separation. And then Facebook found 4.7 degrees, X found 3.4 degrees. So it's worth exploring just how much closer we become and what this means for how we connect online and the closeness of these virtual bonds. So by understanding how quickly information spreads across short social chains, marketers, activists, and behavioral scientists can better predict how trends, behavior, or misinformation go viral. So the theory helps shift the focus of outreach from mass messaging to strategic targeting through influential nodes. A marketing campaign may send a message about a product to an influencer who can easily advertise it to millions. And so we've all seen this with viral videos where all it takes is one message to start the next global movement. And so another thing is for problem solving, I think is just maybe even just being a little bit organized, because if you just write out a template, a basic problem solving template, I feel like sometimes it makes managing what you're thinking about much easier. Or if you make multiple of the same template for different problems, just kind of make sure to get your thoughts down and in an organized way that you can look back at later. And so I just have some problems, and I made a little outline where I just have a blank space for a problem, a blank space for what's needed, for what exists, for what I can provide, for what's preventing change, for who to reach out to, for how to reach out. And just a real simple outline, and just thinking about some of the most pressing problems I can. And so the first problem is generative technologies used to exploit people's likeness or compete with their content through unethically sourced training data. And what's needed is to look into whether generative technologies trained on real photos, videos, and audio of real people, and ask if they should be criminalized. To look into how these aspects allow for exploitation and what types of exploitation results from them, including data and what's possible. And then maybe to force companies to maintain open source AI generation, and for the parts that can't be open source, such as training material, independent reviews, and then to better educate people on the ways people are exploited from generative technology. And so there are a lot of petitions, and some of them are written very well, and they have a lot of these aspects, but I'm not sure they're strict enough to effectively cut down on exploitation as they could be. And so we have something here from it's from openletter.net. And so they're wanting to disrupt the deepfake supply chain. And so imitate real humans. Deepfakes are non-consensual or grossly misleading AI-generated images, voices, or videos that a reasonable person would mistake as real. And they do not consider this slight altercations to images or voice, nor innocuous entertainment or satire that is easily recognized as synthetic. And deepfakes often involve sexual imagery, fraud, or political disinformation today. And yeah, deepfakes are much easier to create as technology advances. Safeguards are needed. And so they want to fully criminalize deepfake child pornography, even when only fictional children are depicted. Establish criminal penalties for anyone who knowingly creates or knowingly facilitates the spread of harmful deepfakes, and require software developers and distributors to prevent their audio and visual products from creating harmful deepfakes and to be held liable if their preventative measures are too easily circumvented. So they say these could nurture socially responsible businesses. It would not need to be excessively burdensome. So these are some of the points that would motivate certain people or many people. So yeah, 98% of all deepfakes online are pornography. And it is growing 400% in 2022 to 2023. And women are heavily targeted, 99% out of all of those deepfakes. Okay, yeah, so in general, women are harassed online. And so yeah, the technology, you can use one photo to make a convincing deepfake video of somebody. Fraud by deepfakes increased 3,000% to 2023. Celebrities, political figures, in terms of elections. Okay. So here's an interesting thing they say. Cameras generate tamper-proof digital seals on unaltered photographs and videos of the real world, using cryptographic signature techniques similar to website certificates and login credentials. So if we more broadly employ them, these seals will allow anyone to use open source authentication apps to verify that a properly signed photo or video is authentic. So device manufacturers, software developers, and media companies should work together and popularize these or similar authentication methods, which is good, but that doesn't stop the trauma of the fake ones existing. So that's something else they tried to address. Okay. And yeah, so there's laws that don't target or limit deepfake production adequately, and dissemination as well. Requirements on creators. The whole deepfake supply chain should be held accountable, just as they are for malware and child pornography. Believable, authentic information is necessary for society. Yeah, so deepfakes mislead. Harder and harder to know what's real on the internet, and lines need to be drawn to protect our ability to recognize real human beings. Real performers, like if broadcast entertainment becomes saturated with deepfakes, the connection between audience and performers will erode, and deepfakes will unfairly displace the people whose works were used to train AI in the first place. And so that's a good distinction too, because a lot of them are focusing on the worst parts as well,
Download TikTok,
but
search
they
/free,
might
and
leave
start
out
slashing today.
just how it affects people and displaces people
Paying extra
through
for tire
through
care
using
is
their data
BS. You know,
that was
bad
probably,
service. So at
in a lot of
Midas,
cases,
we're rolling out our BS-free
unethically
tire
sourced.
guarantee, included with paid
And
installation
and then we
tax
also
on
have
purchase.
public
Pay
citizen.
nothing for flat replacements, nada for flat repairs, and zilch for tire rotations every 5,000 miles. That's $0
AI
for
regulation
that.
and
So with this
enforceable
limited
rules
lifetime tire guarantee,
are some things
you
that
get
they
a whole lot of nothing
comprehensively
compared to what the other
support.
guys charge for tire care. That's the BS-free tire guarantee, only at Midas.
Enjoy more ways to save at Pick and Save, like low prices in every aisle. And
So
you
they
can
want
clip and
comprehensive
save
federal
more with
AI
digital
regulation,
coupons in the Pick and Save app. Plus,
for
you can
consumer
earn fuel
rights,
points to save up to $2 per gallon at the pump. So
clear
it's
labeling
always easy to
AI
save
generated
big.
content,
Pick and Save, fresh for
watermarking and
everyone.
traceability
Savings may vary by
messaging
state. Fuel restrictions apply. See site for
mechanisms.
details.
Save big on your favorites with the buy 5 or more, save $1 each sale. Simply buy 5 or more participating items and save $1
And some
each
of these are
with
not
coupon.
specific
Pick
to
and save,
deepfakes or
fresh for
generative
everyone.
AI. Yeah, so right to collectively bargain over automation and algorithmic decision making. Yeah, so this is targeting the training data with audits, public impact assessments, disclosure of training data. And then this last one from Citizen. So what's happened with Grok is pretty famous recently. Exploiting women and children. So malicious actors will find it easier to disrupt elections, incite violence, and sow chaos in ways that are difficult to detect and nearly impossible to stop. In the workplace, so creatives seeing their likeliness cloned and exploited for profit without compensation or control. And courts' legal standards of credibility, like audio and evidence, are now suspect, jeopardizing judicial outcomes. Yeah, so those are some of the better ones that I felt like exist right now. And so I was reviewing them and just thinking about them. And even before I reviewed them, what I was thinking is so I don't know if any of them really call for taking photos of real people and videos of real people and audios of real people out of the training data. Because and this is something that I would need to talk to somebody who has knowledge of generative AI, but just with how bad things are, I think this is a thinking big moment where, you know, if something shouldn't be happening at an early stage, then that's like the best place to stop it. And so they were hinting at that they wanted transparent data sets and auditing of that. But I didn't see anything say like we should take the photo, because if the question is the benefit of using real photos, real videos, and real audio of people in training data sets outweighing the harms, I think it's no. And so I think that's an important thing to pursue. And so since I don't see any of that on these, I am thinking about drafting my own. So what's preventing change is corporate greed, lack of foresight, incompetency in government regulation, lack of unified action and opposition. And so, yeah, I can try to talk with some people, hopefully talk with a legal expert as well. And then, if I do make a petition, then I can try to share it widely and talk about what these other petitions talk about as well, and just how things could be different. And so that's something that I am really interested in, and I have been for a while. And I think if I could just be connected to certain people, and depending on what they think, then I think that could be something that's really necessary and could get a lot of traction. So I'm interested in this for sure in the short term. And the other problem is discrimination through ignorance or stigmas. And so what's needed is sharing of knowledge, sharing of experiences, and open-mindedness. So something that exists is a Harwood community conversation, and we're going to look at that. And I think sometimes maybe people don't know like how to approach problems, because a lot of people, maybe what they see in the media is just kind of nonsense, and maybe it's like a lot of debates about what can be done instead of things that are maybe a little bit more helpful. And so this is a conversation that is intentional and that is based off research, and it's been helping thousands of communities for, I guess, 25 years. And so I think if more people knew about this, then maybe people could, better be motivated to get involved and to make connections and to even just talk about problems in their life and their communities' lives. Because I think if you have just some organization, then it feels a lot less intimidating. And so this is something I've come across, and so specifically my idea would be hosting these conversations with a focus on people's backgrounds and have them describe how they want specific things would change in their life or in the lives of people around them. And then I think another thing, sometimes people like interacting, and so these conversations are meant to be around 8 to, I think, 20 people. And if people who are in the audience, maybe I can give them something to do, and maybe I could, suggest that if people make art, that I would promote the art made on, based on the conversations of what people say during the conversations. And so, yeah, I think there's some just easy things that you could do to make it fun for people who are participating and listening. And yeah, I think the conversation style itself is a cool concept. So let's see here. 2 important purposes. They're turned outward to authentically engage members of the community. They generate public knowledge that can then be used to inform decision making of all kinds. So people's aspirations, people's concerns, how people think and talk about a given issue in relation to the community, the changes needed to reach our aspirations for the community, what people believe we can do, and who they trust to take action. So it engages the community, opens the door to new relationships, finds new partners, sharing public knowledge, creates coalition opportunities, develops strategies working on the issue, and building capacity to work together. mobilize resources, creating natural pathways for people to contribute. Specifically for the hardwood conversations, I think this could be something I could do on stream a lot, and maybe it would be kind of a cool regular part of the stream, and I can reach out to people, anyone, but specifically people with noticeably different backgrounds who seem interested in the idea and sharing their thoughts. And so I think the reason I would try to focus on people's problems or what they see as problems is dehumanization passed on through generations, media influences, and social influences. And so now I'm going to move on to the next problem, with is police and ICE habitually lying and exploiting innocent people. And so what we need is a readily available Know Your Rights guide, maybe on all 50 state laws and globally pertaining, and globally ideally, pertaining to knowing how to record police, or in the US, ICE interactions, knowing how to prepare beforehand, and knowing how to act in those interactions. And I've seen, when I'm looking at maybe witness.org, and I think it was in my CLU, they had this little disclaimer that said this Know Your Rights is not a replacement for legal advice. So I think we have the Know Your Rights, but I think it would be a lot nicer if we had one that was for all 50 states, and I couldn't find it. So maybe it exists, but I couldn't find one. And because then we can, share with people, say, hey, this is what I use for my state. It also has your state. Whereas maybe it's a little bit difficult to sift through the information if you're not a legal expert and you're trying to learn, and it's all kind of scattered about. Less restrictions on filming police in public in certain states, because as this one says, there's wiretap laws where sometimes are used against challenge the right to record law enforcement. Some more platforms which allow people to upload civilian interactions with police or protests without being banned if unexpected things happen. And so I think on Witness as well, they kind of tell people how they can clarify, like, this contains violent content if they upload it to YouTube. That's what they recommend, but
ways to save at Pick and Save, like low
I have
prices
seen,
in every aisle. And you can clip
like
and
here,
save more with
I've
digital
seen,
coupons in the Pick and Save app. Plus, you can earn fuel points to save up to
and I don't like using Reddit, but I mean, it's just about something being banned from Twitch, so there's not maybe going to be very many articles about it. But there's a channel on Twitch that broadcasts protests, and they broadcast maybe up to 20 protests at a time sometimes. And so people post protest live streams in their Discord, and then they rebroadcast them on Twitch. And I think they got banned at one point because there was violence, and I think that's not ideal. And I think that's something we could push for, because I don't think, if it's fine on YouTube, then I don't see why it would be impossible to implement on Twitch, or similar platforms, maybe globally. And yeah, prohibiting violent extremist content. So they're back on. It was like a 14-day suspension, I think somebody in the thread said. But still, I think that's something that, as maybe fascism grows in some of the more prominent countries, that it's something that we should be maybe pushing for. And so I have this, let's see here. So it's generally legal to, so this is witness.org. A lot of these that I'm going to be showing here in this next couple seconds. It's a pretty good resource. And they kind of explain why filming can help a lot, and they try to explain as best they can options you have to make the film helpful in court if it ever gets to that point. And so filming an abusive immigration enforcement action can help expose enforcement violations, deter violence, substantiate reports, and serve as evidence. But if the footage isn't captured, preserved, and shared safely and ethically, there can be unintended harm for both the person being filmed and the person filming. And so that's something we're going to talk as well, because, you know, as like I said, fascism grows in prominent countries, then I think we have to rethink existing systems of how we spread information, how we spread media of protests, and see if they're outdated or if they're harming more than they're doing good, because yeah, it's important just with the petition to look at every aspect of the process and make sure we're not, allowing people to be exploited. And yeah, it just has a lot of good information, such as, preserving the metadata, not editing, and just very specific information that I'm not going to get into, but it's good if you want to look at it on your own. So video evidence is one such tool, and yet it remains a largely untapped tool in the US immigration context. To strengthen individuals' immigration case. To help you ensure that the video in your hands can be used not only for advocacy efforts for individuals in a legal context. And so it has resources for community members who find themselves in situations they can choose to record enforcement violations as they happen in their immediate aftermath, and to share the footage with investigators, lawyers, or maybe others. And so this is something as well that I think it's interesting, but it might be outdated. And so they're talking about blurring images, and they talk about how YouTube has a blurring feature. And this is where I would want to talk about this with somebody who's more knowledgeable about AI editing and AI deblurring, because there's a lot of resources on AI deblurring, and I'm seeing some things about the dangers of AI deblurring, because people think they looked at blurring as something they do, right, if they're going to post photos of their children or their family. But then I don't see a lot of things that say that deblurring is advanced enough to where that's not good enough to just blur someone's face. I think it's possible that you have to remove the pixels at this point, because even if the technology isn't there yet, the technology might be there in the future, where if you just use one of these blurring apps, then maybe at some point in the future, deblurring apps are going to be able to, get pretty much the exact look of the photo before you blurred it. Or at least good enough to where they would know who you are, or whoever the photo is of. And so right here, though, they're talking about So I've yet to find an ethics code which speaks directly to the appropriate use of facial blurring. As far as like photojournalism goes, is what they're saying, Witness is saying. So they don't think it would be unethical to blur out a face or a black box, for instance. I think most news photo agencies and publications just want to keep it simple and say we should not digitally manipulate image as to content, with very few exceptions, leave it at that. And so that's how things have been, right? And so that's how I think people want to sometimes hold on to their worldview, but I'm not sure if as things get worse, then I think maybe that's worth re-examining and just seeing if we can change things, because I think we can change things in a way that's actually very engaging for people. Because I think one of the arguments is here, right? And so perhaps most importantly, what effect does facial blurring have on the image's ability to elicit emotional response from viewers? And what if the image doesn't need to, because something else can replace the image, is what I'm thinking. But they do say here, just before I move on, such as blurring might save lives without opening the floodgates for more nefarious digitization tactics. Yeah, so Witness is asking if blurring saves lives and if it should be more prominent in photojournalism there. And yeah, this is just something really simple though that I think everyone can do, whether or not they do it, is just to question everything you see, because I've seen this from Witness, right? But I just question it because of some things I know from AI technologies, and so reading on AI technologies. And so that's how things get changed, because I think it's good that Witness is questioning it. I think it's good that I'm questioning what Witness is saying as a possible solution. And maybe I'm not the first person to push for what I'm like suggesting or about to suggest, but these are just things that I haven't heard of, or maybe that at least I haven't really seen pushed. And so here's where they talk about live streaming. And so they're not against it, but they think like you just need to be careful about it. And that's kind of why I'm looking into these technologies and maybe thinking about working with developers to develop technologies for live streaming protests in a way that removes pixels. Okay. Yeah. And so there are many legal sources of information on how to prepare and respond to these situations, such as this booklet from witness.org. And the video blurring does exist. And specifically for ease of blurring when uploading to YouTube is what witness.org pushed for years ago, and they got it done. And then also, what else exists is countless media police caught lying to where we should know not to blindly trust them as communities. And so, in terms of what I'm thinking,
clip and save more with digital coupons in the Pick and Save app. Plus, you can earn fuel points to save up to $2 per gallon.
Asking AI deblurring experts, I guess, if there's any blurring technology that they think would be foolproof in the future, or if it's more of a thing where we need to remove pixels if we really want to keep people's identity safe.
Pick and Save, fresh for everyone.
And so, what I think my first thought is, our first idea, is if we had a trend where photographers keep the full evidence locally of the images and media they take of these protests or enforcement violations, but they work with artists to create depictions, rather than if people think that a photo with a black box with the pixels removed isn't emotionally inviting or powerful. I mean, these are free jobs for artists, right? If it's not safe, and if the alternative isn't powerful enough, who's saying that we can't create depictions where photojournalists are no longer the prominent media depictors, but it's drawing, it's painting, it's etching, who knows? And animating as well, because I mean, animators are struggling, and I think this would be not only just a cool thing, but I think it could be necessary if people don't like the black box idea, if people don't think the black box idea is going to work. And so here's some things that finish what I'm saying and then we'll look at this. Okay. So I think with technological advancements, or possibly in the future, I think we should be advocating for developing revolutionary technology which seeks to identify the police in live video and simultaneously cover everyone else with black bars. And this could globalize live streaming of police and ICE interaction in a much safer way than we currently have. And so if not feasible short term, maybe this could be done as a video filter. And so if that seems unlikely, I just want to put into perspective how many millions of dollars go into live surveillance footage of the general public in as many public places and businesses areas as possible, whereas how much attention goes into seeking live surveillance footage of police, which doesn't compromise the vulnerable people interacting with police to harassment and more. Because I think there are developers who are interested in these, or have these values of keeping people safe in these situations. I'm just not sure if they've had this idea floated to them. But who knows, maybe it's not possible short term, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was. And so that's something I'm interested in as well, short term, and trying to push myself, hopefully. If improvements are made in protecting the vulnerable and media depictions, interactions with enforcement agencies, then improving collaborative ways of sharing and amplifying live streams to keep people safe and protecting the realities of these interactions from manipulation is the easier next step. And I think that's what I'm kind of flowing with the Twitch, and more platforms allowing protest media, because if people can record media safely live, if people can post it platforms globally, then what people could do is make their own accounts. Everyone can have an account on these free sites, and they can stream, many of them with free accounts. And then people on there with audiences could amplify them fairly easily. And so that's, like I said earlier, keep in mind the degrees of separation, the small world. The revolution could definitely be televised, is what I'm thinking. But so near impunity for illegal behavior from police is preventing change, as well as lack of cultural awareness of how protest footage from the public is used to arrest participants and possibly more. And we'll look at that in a second, but for here, I'm just gonna see, so on the screen we have, so NYPD has paired up with the FBI's high-intensity drug trafficking area program during the current wave of protests, merging the NYPD biometric repository with the FBI's. Two agencies also sought protest footage from the public in an effort to identify and arrest criminals. And so I'm not sure how many people from the public understand that that's happening. So he says, Director of Urban Justice Center's STOP project says the law is decades behind, and points to a Supreme Court decision from as recently as 2018, in which it finally ruled unconstitutional for law enforcement to track an individual's location for an extended period of time without using their cell phone without a warrant. If you're tracking my face for an extended period of time, you should need a warrant or judicial oversight, Cohn says. So Clearview AI was revealed by the New York Times. A shadowy facial recognition company violated TOS number of social media platforms to scrape together nearly 4 billion images, creating the largest repository of images from which law enforcement could draw comparisons. ACLU is currently suing Clearview in Illinois, one of the few states with articulable laws around biometrics and privacy. And so police have data from corporations they shouldn't have, according to terms of service of social media companies. And we're giving them, even more media than that currently on a fairly large scale. And So here's something that I think is interesting, and this is from Document Journal. So Bruce Rapiro, professor at Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism and executive director of the Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma, is also weighing the ethics of photojournalism and facial recognition. And so Shapiro told me through email about how to safely interpret, particularly around surveillance and the dangers of protesters being targeted for retaliation, varies dramatically from place to place. Under a repressive regime with an aggressive political surveillance system, say, for instance, Iran, there is a strong argument for caution in depicting activists who may be endangered. However, in the US and many other democracies, there's less of a threat. Nonviolent protest is a deliberately and proudly public act, people stepping out before their neighbors to take a stand. While there are plenty of abuses being photographed at a rally, it is not itself normally a danger to a protester. And so, that's from 2020 though. And so, again, I think, I think his quote's right. I think maybe in 2020 his quote's right. But what about now? And so, I think people are just used to doing this in the US at protests. They're used to filming in this way. And I think, as fascism grows, then this is something that we need to reevaluate.
Plus, you can earn fuel points to save up to $2 per gallon at the pump. So it's always easy to save big. Pick and save. Fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for
yeah, in
details.
addition to
Save
this,
big on your favorites with the buy 5 or more, save $1 each sale. Simply buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with your card. Pick and save. Fresh for everyone.
I have a couple more just talking about how protesters may be harassed after with the footage. Oh, this is the one. Okay. So 46 states and the federal government have introduced more than 250 bills, with 46 bills becoming law in 23 states, primarily in the U.S. South and Midwest. Oftentimes, these laws criminalize specific types of conduct or tactics used by protesters, such as making it illegal to trespass, interfere with, tamper, or destroy critical infrastructure such as oil and gas pipelines, or expanding the definition and increasing the penalties for crimes that already exist, such as disorderly conduct, blocking thoroughfares or highways, or engaging in a riot. Many of these laws are overly broad and vague and can be applied to even peaceful protesters. So in Georgia, they're using a vague state domestic terrorism law to target individuals who engage in protests against the construction of a law enforcement and fire department training facility on the outskirts of the city of Atlanta, carrying a sentence of up to 35 years in prison. All of these laws seek to hyper-criminalize acts of dissent and chill individual rights to freedom of peaceful assembly. And so in addition to the footage, we have places where, peaceful activity is criminalized. And so when maybe it sounds good when these lawmakers or these police say that, it's only in cases of criminals that are, we're using the footage against. And that the footage is often being used against people who are peaceful, but criminalized. And so here's some reasons from the EFF why people might want to wear masks. A long law enforcement history of harassing and surveilling people for publicly criticizing or opposing law enforcement practices or other government policies. Non-governmental actors may try to identify protesters in order to retaliate against them, for example, by limiting their employment opportunities. Anonymity is a fundamentally human right. EFF has long advocated for anonymity online. We've also supported low-tech methods to protect our anonymity from high-tech snooping in public places. For example, we supported legislation to allow car owners to use license plate covers. And They're not the only ones who said this. I think, let's see, what else? AP also said something like this, and one that I'll show. But in addition to wearing masks, it's again where the masks are almost outdated because the facial recognition technology is so good that they sometimes only need part of your eyes, or just a very small portion of your face to get a match. And this is from the company itself, but it's explaining how they can get matches just from eyes, even if people are masks. And so face masks may hide features, but they shouldn't hide identities. So it's two countering thoughts here. One's from the AI surveillance company, and one's from rights groups here. But so I don't doubt that these companies have this technology, and it's been written quite a bit from journalists as well. And so the EFF also says that law enforcement should not wear masks when they arrest protesters and others. An elementary principle of police accountability is to require uninformed officers to identify themselves to the public, discourages officer misconduct, facilitates accountability if an officer violates the law, has long supported the First Amendment right to record police on duty, is what the EFF has done. So they think it's wrong for state legislatures and now the federal law enforcement to try to criminalize or punish mask wearing at protests, especially now when civil liberties are being cracked down on. Okay, and then there's the laws that restrict mask wearing. 18 states and Washington, D.C. have laws that restrict masks. Since October 2023, 16 bills have been introduced in 8 states to restrict masks at protests. And a lot of these mask laws are based on the KKK, but they've only been recently enforced for completely different reasons. So yeah, concerns about inconsistency in enforcement. And so one of the attorney generals, a Republican, he sent a letter to the state's public university saying protesters could be charged with a felony under the anti-mask law for the state. North Carolina have warned protesters that wearing masks violates the state's anti-mask law. University of Florida students have been arrested and charged with wearing masks in public. And then in previous streams, when we've been talking about civil rights movements, we've been talking about accidents that are said to be accidents by some and said not to be accidents by others. And here's an article about Ferguson protests where, let's see, I think is it 6? Yeah, 6 men? Yeah, 6 deaths. All involving men with connections to protests in Ferguson. In the activist community, that something sinister was at play. And so there's no evidence that they have anything to do with the protests from police, is what they say. So found dead inside torched cars. 3 apparent suicides, another collapsed on a bus. His death ruled an overdose.
Moved into Sheila's apartment downstairs.
That's Danny? I keep seeing his Wi-Fi network. Full bars.
Hey, Danny, welcome.
And they have also had a lot of death threats.
Sweet. Hey, just wondering, what's your mother's maiden name?
Wait, what? Don't listen to him, Danny.
So Reverend Daryl Gray said he found a box inside his car. He had a 6-foot python inside. No arrests have been made. But
Enjoy more ways to save at Pick and Save, like low prices in every
in one of the
item.
earlier
And
articles
you
from
can click and
2020,
save more with
that was
digital coupons
what a lot of
in
people
the
were
Pick and
pointing
Save.
to
Plus, you can
for
earn
why
points
they were
to
thinking
save up
maybe
to $2 per gallon at the pump. So it's always
people's
easy to
identities
save
should be
big.
blurred.
Pick and save, fresh for everyone.
And
Savings
so
may vary by state.
it's not just the families of these people. There are some people
Save
in
big on your
the
favorites with the buy 5 or
in
more
the
save a
journalistic
dollar each
community
sale.
who has
Simply
concerns.
buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with your card. Pick and save.
And so another
Fresh for
problem is
everyone.
city budgets overspending on surveillance technology while failing to motivate their police to film their own interactions. Okay. And the next problem is harassment of protesters and warlike tactics imposed on protesters. Okay. And so something that's needed are anti-harassment or anti-privacy laws allowing for masks and facial coverings for protesters at public places globally. Public protests globally. Educate people about facial recognition technologies, repositories, and how little of your body are able to identify who you are now or in the future as technology advances. And so even if these companies can't do it now, a lot of people are thinking that it's just going to keep advancing. So, yeah, I'm not sure how many people would understand just how advanced some of the AI tech is, and whether it's deep blurring or whether it's facial recognition. And so demilitarization of police, require police and law enforcement to wear masks. Unified anti-harassment outfits for protests is something that I have been thinking of, and I haven't seen a lot of it or much. I mean, I don't think I've seen anything at all, possibly. I know there have been guides, such as Hong Kong protesters' guides of what to wear, of what materials are good for dealing with different chemicals or things like this. So we also could need protest guides with know your rights information, provided by legal experts for 50 states or globally. I just think those things would be nice because I think it's kind of hard to just know or just to find the information. And so for people with little time who want to go to protests, it would be nice if it would just take a little time to know your rights. And so as far as the outfits for protesters go, in an earlier stream we were talking about how the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense raised money to buy materials to respond to discrimination, and so other things that exist are outdating mailing list forms of protests, community-made protest guides with input from legal experts, federal laws funding militarization of police and allowing them to purchase military materials for the outfits, which I think would be helpful in any variety of weather, and possibly at an affordable price to produce or to crowdfund, I guess. And then and so I feel like when you think of protests, like Amnesty recommends things such as eye protection. They recommend just covering a cloth with some sort of liquid so it helps for chemical reactions. But I'm thinking that if people were more unified in what they wear, it could really help in places where fascism is so prominent. And that even like a DIY parka, where there's some sort of outline on how it should look. I think you can make like a pull-away parka that's light, and maybe we would have to do like one or two materials if it was like not ideal for certain environments with one material. But I don't think it would take very long to research materials that would be affordable and available globally. And I think if people just put like a big parka or like some pull-away pants from thin material on top of what they're already wearing, that could be something that's very cheap to do, and would just take a little bit of collaboration. And then as far as the outdating mailing list forms at protests, when I went to a protest for No Kings, they were asking for people's full names, they were asking for people's phone numbers, they were asking for an email, and I think it's just public knowledge for a lot of people that phone numbers are not good to give out. And if we're having this harassment of people, and just data collecting that's illegal, then why would we make it easier for people just to grab data, personal data, like very, very very important personal data such as phone numbers at protests by just having them out on these sheets. And so I think that's something that's pretty easy, like maybe the easiest thing that I've thought of to just address very quickly, and just ask for an email, ask for a first name. I'm not sure why they would need something more than that for a mailing list, but maybe I'm wrong about something. Because for an email, you can use an email alias for free through Proton Mail. Yeah. You don't have to have your full name in your email every single time you make one. I think that could help as things continue to trend towards fascism in certain places. So there's a lack of Supreme Court ruling here. So here they talk about the lack of Supreme Court ruling, I think. Maybe that's not the right one. Oh yeah, it is. Here we go. Okay. Lack of understanding of how identified peaceful protesters may be harassed after protests, even using partial facial coverings at protests. Lawmakers failing to hold police to reasonable accountability in what they can and can't use or carry. If certain companies knew their products were used to protest fascism, they may gatekeep the products from protester organizers. But I think what I was thinking of in terms of just the thin coverings could maybe even be made by people in communities and maybe shipped out, if it's something that's really light. And at a certain point, maybe also gas masks, but that gets more expensive, and so it's possible though. Knowledgeable activists, yeah. So I would want to reach out to activist strategists to see what they think about the outfit idea. But I think, again, like in places where the fascism is more prominent, then it's going to be more necessary to keep people safe from harassment. And yeah. And maybe even you reach out to small businesses for this idea. Maybe small businesses are more likely to help provide their materials, or their, the people who work there are more likely to help than corporation. But yeah, I think that the clothing idea, again, is something that I could try to address short term by reaching out. I don't think it would be impossible. Okay, so this is the militarization of police. So, federal programs have provided billions of US dollars in military equipment to police departments across the USA. Allows the US Department of Defense to transfer military equipment to police for free. The other one allows law enforcement to purchase military equipment with its own funds at the military discount rate. Ammunition, weapons, tactical armored vehicles. The result is military equipment in situations that do not warrant them, including peaceful protests. Okay. And so the next problem I was thinking about is for streaming. As a new streamer, calm news coverage isn't likely to go viral sometimes. And so
enjoy more ways to save at Pick and Save, like low prices in every
it's interesting that I even have to think about this, but I was considering, like, do I need to be serious on this account? But I don't think I do, because at least not all the time. I mean,
Pick
But
and save, fresh for everyone. Savings
humor
may
is
vary
how
by state.
people
Restrictions
make
apply.
connections
See site for
sometimes.
details.
Save big on your favorites with the buy five
It's
or
how
more,
people
save
go
a dollar
viral
each sale.
sometimes.
Simply buy five or
It's
more
how you
participating
just
items and save $1 each with your
cover
card.
serious
Pick and
things
save,
by,
fresh for everyone.
but you make it lighthearted. And even sometimes being polarizing could grow your audience more than just forcing yourself to stay calm because of other people's expectations of what they think an activist is or how activism should look like. And so yeah, and also just how memes are as well, just like humor. They can do some of the same things. And so if you've ever seen a political meme or a meme relating to social justice or in a social justice context, and it makes you more likely to keep scrolling in relation to that topic or to see more posts from that poster or any of those things, then I think you understand just how powerful memes can be, or political satire, or intentionally cringe content even. And so this is the communications director of the White House. And I think something that people maybe don't realize on a large scale is that Trump isn't posting his own posts most of the time, or at least, you know, he's having input from this person right here. And so the current administration definitely understands the power of memes and of humor to manipulate audiences. And it's interesting because you know, I think a portion of their audience that they manipulate a lot is going to be like white people who maybe have a more propensity to be racist, or have white supremacist thoughts, have discriminatory thoughts towards other minorities, and a lot of what they're reading has been written by this man, or at least edited by this man, and he's not white. So yeah, an interesting side note, but yeah, like corrupt governments understand that it's powerful, and so why would we not use humor for our side? And so I honestly have planned some satires, or at least one satire. Yeah, maybe a couple satire ideas. You know, I wouldn't mind posting polarizing posts, but it would be nice if people stopped having rigid expectations about what's good or bad, because I think this limits activism. Yeah. And I also can do some emotionally engaging video art. Yeah, I think I can make video art, and I have before, that elicits some fairly intense emotions from people who view it. Sometimes even in a hard-hitting way, which could be really useful for activism. I view reach as more valuable than meeting artificial definitions of appropriate behavior. And so the next problem is a term called auto-genocide. And it's kind of what it sounds like, in that it's genocide that happens without direct killing. And so we need continual protection of existing technologies, which aid in fighting exploitation and corruption through increased knowledge of what's happening. Continually funding things and people we benefit from will also help. And better knowledge about existing forms and trends of autogenocide helps. Better health education and importance in our culture, our culture taking health more seriously. Okay, so we've talked about this in a previous stream, and autogenocide, okay. It's genocide that a population is coerced to perform on itself. Maybe it's a media-incited war, often accompanied by wide availability of drugs and weapons to ensure maximum violence. Sometimes it's death by misinformation, as occurred in the US during the COVID pandemic. Sometimes it is destruction of the environment. A lack of healthy food, water, and air results in reduced overall life expectancy. A lack of universal health care greatly increases overall deaths. Poor constructions of roads, buildings, and other infrastructure causes recurring mass deaths. Poor planning and funding can prevent emergency responses and increase death tolls in disasters. A lack of regulations, transparency, and guidance can make it impossible for people to learn how to not poison themselves and their families. A lack of accountability for corporations and governments leaves people helpless to stop the environmental destruction destroying our health and future. Autogenocide can also include increased auto-homicide, which is suicide or other self-destructive behaviors instigated externally. Mass desperation, unemployment, poverty, illness, tragedy, crime, violence, drugs, and widely available weapons all encourage self-destruction. So, she wrote about being healthy, strong, educated, and informed to start contributing to your own governance. And it says, autogenocide will kill a lot of people, but it is also meant to prevent them from functioning at their true capacity. Tyranny thrives with a helpless, weakened public. And that was what she said there. And so a lot of this is informational. If we knew more about, as I was saying, knew more about what's happening and had better knowledge about how to stay
Enjoy
on
more
top
ways
of the
to save at
auto-genocide,
Pick and Save, like low prices
then,
in every aisle. And you can clip and
that's
save
going
more
to help
with
a
digital.
lot. And so this is kind of more of how autogenocide is carried out. And so what this is going to talk about is just how corporations get activists off their backs with less than exemplary actions. And so they want to divide activists into 4 groups: radicals, idealists, realists, and opportunists. Opportunists are seen as in for themselves and can be pulled away for their own self-interest. The realists can be convinced that transformative change is not possible. We must settle for what is possible. Idealists can be convinced they have the facts wrong and pulled to the realist camp. Radicals who see the system as corrupt and needing transformation need to be isolated and discredited, using false charges to assassinate their character as a common tactic. And this is from Stratford, which is a private intelligence agency. So so it began as a corporate PR firm. And as we'll see in some of the later screenshots in this article, it was for tobacco was one of their clients. And so it's just kind of like the stereotypical corporations using psychology, I guess, to continue autogenocide. So big tobacco, the chemical industry, big agriculture were part of this PR firm's clients. To fend off any and all regulatory efforts aimed in its direction, in the big tobacco direction. The movement was get government off our back. And so they would advocate pro-tobacco goals through outside organizations, organize veterans against to oppose the workplace smoking regulation. And so there were an increasing number of proposed federal and state regulations on the use and sale of tobacco products, and that's why they were hired. And it fairly closely, let's see here. So the text of the contract matched Get Government Off Our Back nearly verbatim, and the contract with America was a Republican Party draft that froze federal regulations. And so Heather Marsh was saying regulations are, something that keeps the corporations from committing autogenocide. And so some of the people who were, founding the ideologies of this group, they used a war metaphor. Corporations wage war upon activists to ensure that corporate activities, power, profits, and control are not diminished or significantly reformed. The burden is on the activists to make fundamental social change in a political environment where the corporate interests dominate both politically and through the corporate media. Stratford operatives are much more sophisticated about social change than the activists they oppose. They have limitless resources at their disposal, and their goal is relatively simple: make sure that ultimately the activists fail to win fundamental reforms. I think they were often amused by the naive, egotistic antics and failures of activists that routinely fooled and defeated. Ultimately, this is war, and the best warriors will win. And again, they use the term war, which, it's equaling a hidden genocide, so I guess it's fairly accurate. And then also, we're gonna bring this up here. Yeah, okay. I haven't looked at this in a while, but this is the Simple Sabotage Manual. And so, for some context of why I think this is interesting to look at, it's just, it's showing what's destructive. And so I think, the CIA is going to know what's destructive fairly well. And so if you do the opposite, then you'll know what's not destructive and what's proactive. And so, if we just look at this and do the opposite for these movements and for these activists, then that should help quite a bit. Okay, so a second type of sabotage: to make faulty decisions, non-cooperative attitude, and to induce others to follow suit, right? So that's just saying, the opposite of that is just just collaboration. Creating an unpleasant situation among one's fellow workers, engaging in bickerings, or displaying surliness and stupidity, right? So the opposite of this could be, if you see a lot of activists getting death threats, then you could just thank them for doing what they do. You could just boost what they're doing. You could give them any, positive affirmations, or stand up for them in some way against the harassment. Accidental delays. And so they have So the motivation is interesting. Personal motives. And so this could just be for motivating people to engage in activism, because I know a lot of people don't engage in activism, and so it could be for a number of reasons, but I think people engaging in activism helps themselves and helps their people around them, and yeah, if you can motivate people to do this more as fascism spreads, then that's great. Pressure, stimulation, assurance, and information, and suggestions. Yeah. So yeah, we can just encourage proactive behavior, safety measures. And another one is like OPSEC for safety measures. Like I was kind of saying with the mailing list, it's like, just think about OPSEC and anti-harassment measures. All right, I think that's good enough for that. There is an information war, a knowledge war, a war caused by corporate and governmental greed. And so, if we use existing technologies and make sure that we keep the existing technologies safe, then I think, there's a chance that a lot of improvements can be made fairly quickly. So there's technologies which aid in fighting exploitation and corruption, such as encryption, internet ISPs, VPNs, social media, messaging apps such as Signal, tech companies such as Apple. So there's also consistently compassionate rights groups, activists, efficient nonprofits, lawyers, health experts, publicly available research on areas of health, non-corporate funded media, compassionate laws and regulations, areas where transparency exists. And just going to quickly here look at some screenshots.
Do you want free internet
so
forever?
in this one,
Yeah, we thought so.
this one says
That's why
how
Spectrum
the
is giving
NSA
you
went
just
out of their
that.
way to
Free
sabotage
fiber-powered internet forever when you switch
encryption,
and get 4 mobile lines for
which really
free.
leveled the playing
No
field
internet bills,
when
no
they weren't
taxes,
successful,
no late
because
fees.
now
Just fast fiber-powered
journalists
internet.
and
Call
activists and
833-901-0178
everyone
to find out
victims
how.
of abuse
Hurry,
have
this deal
access
won't
to
last
encryption
forever. Once more,
that keeps them safe.
833-901-0178 or visit spectrum.com/free-forever to learn more.
And then we also have
Still staring at your screen.
let's
Yeah,
see.
same tab for way too long. Take a quick break and get something for free.
This from Berners-Lee,
TikTok/and free.
the
Pick items. Share a
inventor of
link
the
and
modern
watch the
internet.
price drop to zero. No checkout stress.
And so he was asking here if,
Download TikTok. Search
he asks
/free
himself if
and start
the internet's
searching
truly
again.
free, and he doesn't think all of it is. So he describes, we see a handful of large platforms harvesting users' private data to share with commercial brokers or even repressive governments. We see ubiquitous algorithms that are addictive by design and damaging to our teenagers' mental health. So, goes along with what we were just saying with corporations and governments and lack of freedom and, being conditioned into addiction. Okay, and then he also, had to fight for net neutrality because ISPs were under attack. And then we have this is from the EFF here about VPNs. And lawmakers want to ban VPNs, and they have no idea what they're doing. And so, yeah, Michigan here, that would force internet providers to actively monitor and block VPN connections, which failed, but they tried. UK officials calling VPNs a loophole that needs closing. So they describe what VPNs are, which route your internet traffic through a server somewhere else. So I see your IP address, not your location. And so Wisconsin is trying to block VPNs. And it's technically impossible because websites have no way to tell if a VPN connection is coming from, Wisconsin or India. So then they're forcing websites to either cease operation in Wisconsin or block all VPN users everywhere just to avoid legal liability in the state. And so it's threatening to break VPN access for the internet, and the unintended consequences of this provision could far outweigh any theoretical benefit. And then they're saying who uses VPNs, which is, companies and activists and journalists and abuse survivors. Okay, so developers of apps that use end-to-end encryption to protect private communications could be considered hostile actors in the UK. And that includes developers like those who develop Signal and WhatsApp. Hostile activity simply because their technology makes it more difficult for UK security and intelligence agencies to monitor communications. And so he's saying how foreign states would benefit from this. Yeah, so journalists carrying confidential information or material personally embarrassing to the Prime Minister on the eve of important treaty negotiations could face similar scrutiny. And Apple has gone under fire in the past several times in repressive countries such as China. What they've done here is they severely limited airdrop feature, which is what protesters used to organize, and before they did this in any other portion of the world. And so, yeah, I think from all these people we learn that and all these technologies that are necessary for standing up to corruption, we learn that they're constantly under attack and globally. And so, yeah, misinformation, troll farms, propaganda, corruption, incompetency, misuse of funds, not enough intentionality, and knowledge of health and culture are preventing change. And so for a lot of these, it's pretty similar about who you can reach out to and how to reach out. You can reach out to journalists, lawmakers, lawyers, friends, family, activists, researchers, and you can do it for social media, email, letters, phone, in-person, Signal. And then another problem is harassment of journalists and activists. So what's needed is better solidarity when activists and journalists are exploited. An example is professors at universities who simply spoke up about genocide in Gaza and were fired, and better knowledge about smear campaigns and troll farms and how to counter them. And so we're going to pull up some screenshots. And so this is an article about the first tenured professor at university to be fired for comments made on genocide in Gaza and for actions in protest of the genocide. So San Jose State University. And so there was a faculty in a different university who was invited to speak, and that faculty in question had denied in his student newspaper that what was happening in Gaza was a genocide. But yet he was coming to their campus to talk about a two-state peace solution. And so she found that deeply disturbing, or really disturbing. And so she emailed some of the sponsors of the event and just letting them know that this was happening and that he was denying genocide and about to give a speech at the university. And so she told the English History and DEI office, and they asked them to withdraw their co-sponsorship. And so she was accused of trying to cancel him. And so there was a faculty vote unanimously defending her and her actions, but the president overturned this vote. And so she was dismissed. And at this point, when the article was written, the union was helping her, but yeah, it seems like she's been dismissed, so.
Enjoy more ways to save at Pick and Save, like low prices in every aisle. And you can clip
And so the
save
interviewer
more with
was
digital
shocked by some of the things that were
coupons in the Pick
said
and Save app. Plus, you can earn
that this
fuel
person
points
supposedly
to save
did.
up to $2 per gallon at the pump.
And so they were
it's
saying
always
that
easy to save
at the
big.
protests,
Buy two, get two free on 12 packs of Coca-Cola,
there was death to
Pepsi,
the
or
Jews
7-Up.
chant,
Limit 8 with your card. Pick and Save.
uncritically
Proudly serving
recirculated
Wisconsin since 1872.
by a
Savings may vary by
professor.
state. Fuel restrictions apply. See site for details.
Yeah, so multiple faculty recirculated those claims
When you can slash TikTok slash and free
that
lets you
were
cut prices
unverified.
all the way to zero. Download TikTok, search slash free, and share the link to get free items. Start slashing now.
So it's collusion between administrators and witnesses that include faculty in creating these false narratives to try to paint a person like they're crazy. And they tried to paint her as if she's an unhinged individual. One of the administrators said in her witness testimony that she thought she was going to throw her off a building. And then another witness testimony commented that the conversation was unremarkable. And so she had a witness who was there who, kind of shot down the lie. And it is really just insane that they did this to her. And it doesn't seem like she lied or that those chants happened, but those were the level of lying that was subjected at her reputation. And so we need more of these public hearings to be more organized. We need to be transparent with each other about their maneuvers that happened. Yeah, and so, so she's saying that they immediately endangered students on her campus, faculty on her campus, staff on her campus, and community on her campus with those lies that they made, that they seemingly made. And a few weeks after the hearing, there was graffiti of mass shooting, and it is cited as something that's 2S on her office building, and her university said it had nothing to do with this, and it was a low-level threat. But she said it relates to her hearing and the irresponsibility of your case that you brought against me in public format and the lies that your witnesses told in the stand, and yet you're going after me for campus climate. And so, I think what's unfortunate in these situations isn't that I mean, the most unfortunate thing is that not enough people stood up for her, because I think there's always going to be people who try to exploit others, but the problem is just the reactions of bystanders when this happens. In my opinion, that's the biggest problem that could be changed quickly, rather than trying to ever prevent abuse from happening. And so this is troll farms. And basically, like, how this relates to the problem I was saying is they can be used to sway opinion about people or a variety of different ways. Okay, so yeah, so this one's an interesting one. 2020 election, Facebook's most popular pages for Christian and Black American content were being run by Eastern European troll farms. Reached nearly half of Americans. Not through user choice, but Facebook's own platform was pushing these accounts on Americans. And so they interviewed a Facebook employee who was trying to stop this and later quit because nothing was being done, I guess, or not enough in their opinion. So the troll farms were reaching 140 million US users per month. 75% never followed any of the pages. So yeah, after this person quit, there were many of the troll farms that were still active. And these troll farms are reaching the same, let's see, demographic group signaled out by the Kremlin-backed IRA during the 2016 election. And so they don't have substantial proof, but still, it's easy to see how it could be used politically by these countries that we understand have capabilities in these areas. Yeah, so anyone could, use these tactics, not just a troll farm. $15,000 Facebook pages, primarily US audience. So 360 million users weekly in the US. Walmart's page reached 40 million less per month, and they were the second largest page. So this troll farm had the largest Christian American page, 20 times larger than the next. The largest African American page, 3 times larger than the next. And the largest Native American page, reaching 400,000 users. 5th largest women's page, reaching 60 million users monthly. And then this one here is from the Europool in 2015 or 2025. They busted a troll farm that created more than 49 million online accounts, and they targeted people from over 80 countries. Yeah, and so it can be used for, let's see here. extortion, migrant smuggling, and distribution of illegal material, and also, yeah, just misinformation.
Just download TikTok, search/free, pick items you want, share the link, and watch the price drop to zero.
And so some of the activists who get harassment, or if you see pages who seem popular, it might not be legitimate popularity, it might be manipulated popularity, it might not be legitimate harassment, it might be, troll farms targeting very capable activists. And the same thing for health. It can be used to do propaganda about things that aren't healthy, things that are healthy. And corporations can use it to avoid regulation. So just a lot of possibilities, but I'm not sure if people understand just how the scale is of these troll farms. And so something that could respond to the problem of harassment of journalists and activists is the concept of your Anon Central. Your Anon Central was basically made to combat harassment of journalists and activists. So this is from Sparta ZC. The whole thing about Anonymous is if you think something should be done, do it yourself and attribute it to Anonymous if you don't want to deal with it in your everyday life. That can range from hacking, organized crime investigations, revolutionary acts, etc. That's the superpower. If you use a specific handle or join a team and announce your actions, you'll be caught eventually. If you say Anonymous did it, then voila, it's harder to prove you did it. In practice, in the past, that meant hundreds of people worldwide announced the same action at once. That's the ideal function. The downside of it all is if, say, you write an article or leak information about a regime or criminal group, there's a high chance some random kid that owns a Guy Fawkes mask or has claimed to be anonymous will get picked up and killed for it. That is why large accounts like Your Anon Central were created in the first place, to amplify anonymous actions and swallow all the risks that come with it. Our goal is to create an environment where you can fight back and filter the tangible from the fantasy. It's not an authority or institution. Me personally, one day I'll probably get served the forbidden tea, but I'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. Enjoy life now, and fight for whatever is right however you can. And I think one thing maybe I can do is just a simple thing. It's not like very inventive, but I think the idea makes a lot of sense. I think it's going to be more necessary maybe in the future, but it's necessary now, and it's already gotten way more necessary. And so maybe I can just regularly share this idea and maybe convince Sparta to accept tips, because just keeping what exists that's good going, as strong as possible is good. And so I think any free thing that we benefit from in terms of activism, in terms of rights, we should be trying to keep track of more now that things are more uncertain, and like giving back to them. So this is one of the things that I think could be really invaluable in the future, especially. So yes, lack of fluidity in response to people being punished for doing the right thing is preventing change. Lack of involvement or attention on effective activist actions and ideas. Lack of ease in knowing who's being exploited in real time to where taking part in many action items is difficult for people with busy schedules. And as far as professors speaking out about the genocide in Gaza, in almost any similar situation, there's a threshold where if enough protesters boycott in solidarity, then the university or whoever is acting immoral will reverse their decision. And even in cases where professors try but the threshold isn't met, if there's a better culture of supporting people who are exploited in these situations, then more professors would be likely to speak out, and the exploitive universities would cause themselves more lasting harm if they chose to continue on their path, because people would have better options with professors with better values. Gatekeeping, activists versus the power of the consumers. And so, yeah, like they can try to gatekeep, but if people react with enough coordination, then the gatekeeping is going to be ineffective. And then lack of whistleblower protections is also something that's preventing this, preventing change. But yeah, I just think like with the professor thing, just an example is that if more universities would speak out when this happens that aren't involved and say like, hey, you can come teach here, or even if the students and the faculty who voted unanimously to keep her, if they got enough participation to call for the resignation of the president, because I mean, it sounds like this person was just bullied out of jobs, and maybe the president is unfit, you know, and the good people don't have to leave, just maybe the president can go, and then fixes go from there. But yeah, I mean, there's just got to be a market, I feel like, for universities who let people engage in free speech. Like if one university was really known for that, I'm sure they get harassment, but also I'm sure people, very bright people, very bright teachers would want to go there to work and to study. And so the last problem that I have to talk about is people not sharing their activist ideas or their experience with abuse. So what's needed is for people to stop gatekeeping when good ideas are shared, and a cultural shift towards valuing the truth and helpful ideas rather than authority or charisma. For people to work on their compassion or empathy levels, or to be able to effectively respond when someone shares they've been abused. New and improved symptoms of dealing with abuse on an institutional level. Understanding moderate short-term stress dealing with abuse situations alleviates heavy long-term stress of resulting neglect. And yeah, so I think it's pretty well known that abuse is expensive in the long term if it's allowed to continue, because then, you know, people have more problems in the future if their abuse they're experiencing is neglected. So what exists are resources which allow people to educate themselves on how difficult having someone share with you that they're abused is to respond to. And there are articles detailing times victims were neglected or punished by child protection services, judges, courts, police, and similar. And there's researching, sharing these trends. There's groups of people advocating to value ideas over reputations, actions and ideas. And we're going to look at an expert describing just how neglect in these situations happens. Okay, so this person is an advisor for a lot of people at every step of the legal process of confronting abuse. And so this is specifically on child abuse and why adults fail to protect children, but also there's very obviously parallels between this and any abuse and addressing any abuse. Asks nearly anyone. They'll say that they would speak up if they thought a child was abused. Many are certain they'd recognize abusive behavior if it were happening. Almost no one believes they would allow harmful sexual behavior to continue if they knew for sure what was going on. Yet the sad truth, millions of children are abused every year in this country. Many of them believe correctly that someone else knows or should know about their situation, but does little or nothing to protect them. Some tell adults what's going on. seeking protection and help, only to be met with disbelief, denial, blame, or even punishment. How can that be? So even adults with no personal experience of child abuse or sexual trauma will often have instant gut-wrenching reactions to hearing or seeing anything about the abuse of a child, particularly sexual abuse. Such unpleasant and unwanted reactions make many people very resistant to paying attention to anything that might trigger such responses again, including clear evidence that the abuse is happening to a child they know. And yeah, I'm not sure how many people know that, and it's interesting to me to read when I first read it, and I think it helps to share. And then I think some people do kind of know like flaws in CPS, but maybe not everyone, and not everyone knows just how prevalent they have been. So it's Child Protective Services. Okay. So, due to being exposed, several employees in this particular office were fired. However, they have now been rehired either in neighboring counties or in the same county again. So the conditions in the new county are returning to the same practices that they had before the light was shown on their evil deeds. Having worked with probably 300 cases statewide and now hundreds and hundreds across the nation and in nearly every state, I am convinced there is no responsibility and no accountability in Child Protective Service system. And that mirrors how people have been seen to deal with police who are found to be corrupt and abusive, as they're just oftentimes moved to a different district. And so, yeah, there's some movements trying to improve the rights here. So workers are expected to maintain caseloads of 40 or more. All right, where was I here? So Texas CPS failed to report hundreds of cases of child abuse and child death. Over half the deaths occurred in homes previously reported to CPS. And this is the last thing. This is from somebody with years of experience in family courts. So they want to abolish family courts. Okay, so I didn't realize when I started how many times across the century there had been serious recommendations, not by people who are particularly radical, but radical recommendations for providing the basic needs of families in the community so that they didn't have to find themselves in court. Rule of law existed in some courtrooms, not others. There were judges who respect due process, and but then there are judges who don't do all those things. And so the reason I'm showing these is just because, if people reach out and systems aren't thought to be very good for dealing with the abuse, and it puts people in a difficult position. So it's like, if we want people to reach out, then we need to have systems in place to send them to that actually work. We need to have people who are actually willing to admit to themselves that the abuse is real and are willing to, listen to the people who are abused. And so, 2015 survey, National Domestic Violence Hotline. 75% of survivors who called the police on their abusers later concluded that police involvement was unhelpful at best and at worst made them feel less safe. A quarter of those surveyed said they were arrested or threatened with arrest when reporting partner abuse or sexual assault to police. About half of survivors never called the police at all, citing fears of discrimination by police, invasion of privacy, wanting to protect their children, not wanting their partner arrested, or concerns that involving the authorities would exacerbate the violence. They might arrest my abuser when he's out. He will hurt me like he has threatened, is someone's fear. Someone thought the police was buddy-buddy with their partner and ignored what they had to say. And the reality of the situation. I was scared and they ignored me. Researchers and survivor advocates are increasingly searching for alternative ways to address domestic violence. More and more, they are beginning to question if involving the police and criminal justice system isn't a safe, reliable option for most survivors. Why is it offered as the main pathway for seeking help? For decades, survivors have told us that it's not safe for them to call law enforcement, and they don't want to be ushered into a criminal justice system, said the board president for the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. What they want is the ability to be safe in their homes and in their families. They want the violence to stop. It's really time we recenter on what the survivors are telling us. And so, yeah, this is something that matters to me. I think in what a lot of these things are kind of pointing to is victim-led activist efforts. But yeah, I mean, for that we have to listen to people who maybe aren't going to be perfect in their speech or their charisma or their extroversion. Okay, so and there are things, like there are a lot of resources that tell people what they can do when someone comes to them for the abuse, whether it's the child or somebody else. And usually it is to go to these existing systems, but there are also things that they say that people can do on their own. So just having an environment where people are more willing to research what they can do and ask people what they can do to help. And then obviously improving the existing systems and looking for new ones. And so, yeah, so I'm gonna see how this wins. I think this was the thing I was most passionate about so far, and so I mentioned this earlier, but I haven't really shared much of the stream, and I think that's part of why I did this stream in the specific way that I did, and just talking about things that I find important, and just how maybe I can contribute uniquely, because I feel like I don't know, maybe people like need to see what I'm capable of before they support me. I'm not sure, but I think some of the things I've talked about here might be things that that not many people or maybe some that are just new ideas for solutions, and yeah, I mean, and it may it may not seem like I spend a lot of time on the stream if I only stream around like an hour and a half per day, but I did all the art myself and all the commands and things myself, and the VTuber myself, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of not something that I've ever done anything similar to, so it's brand new to me, and I do have some limitations, such as physical limitations and I guess strengths and weaknesses, but I think pursuing activism is the most responsible use of my time, and I think like streaming is a surprisingly fitting way to do this, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I can't do this without support, and yeah, at a certain point too, if my following is low, maybe it prevents me from collaboration in a way that it wouldn't if I had more followers and a more notable presence on social medias. And so I'm trying to grow, and I'm trying to go for affiliate here as my first goal, really, but as far as streaming. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to pursue some of the ideas that I've said, and I don't think it's impossible to pursue a lot of them at the same time, because it could just be making a couple emails a day for each one, but it's going to be easier if I have help and if people share my media in my socials, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe this proved something to some people, but yeah, I'm I'm willing to give everything I have towards activism, so I think that's the best case scenario, and hopefully this works out. All right, well, hopefully be there tomorrow.